Thank you for coming to today's presentation of Pandemic Playbook, addressing COVID anxiety and isolation. This is an issue that has come up frequently with many of the clients of the Alzheimer's and Dementia Resource Service, and so we thought we would share with you a little bit about the impact of that anxiety and isolation, and also some tips on how to combat those things, especially when caregiving is part of the picture. So, what we will discuss is the relationship between the pandemic, anxiety, and stress, a little bit about how each of those things impacts the other. We'll talk about how to understand the difference between stress and anxiety, talk about ways for managing those things, and of course, combating the isolation that comes along with being responsible during this pandemic. And then we'll also talk a little bit about thriving or at least surviving during a pandemic. So in support groups or private consultations with clients, a lot of times I hear, why am I feeling so much worse, right? People had been providing care or supporting a loved one with dementia prior to the pandemic. And so they think, even though that person may not have changed very much, they're feeling that it's much, much harder to cope. And some of the reasons for that is that during this pandemic, as we're being asked to isolate and not go out in public, and when we do, to say socially distance, is that we're having a change in our routines. A lot of us, especially people living with dementia, find comfort in routines. um, so getting out of that routine can make it harder to cope, and to remember the things that we're supposed to do, and sometimes it requires a little more help from those around us, whether or not we're living with dementia. So the comfort of that routine is gone. The expectation of what comes next is gone. And along with that, we're sort of losing our stress relief mechanisms too. We're losing access to our exercise spaces, to our friend groups, to the activities that we enjoy. So the ways that we were able to blow off steam before really aren't there. There's also this added layer of increased worry about our health. So, in addition to providing consideration for all the things that we have before, uh, there is this worry about, if I do go out, will I or my loved one contract the coronavirus? What will happen if that happens? Um, can I get the level of care that I need for them without increasing that risk? And that kind of prolonged stress really does a number on the brain, which we'll talk about here in just a little bit. Because of that worry, there are also some decreased care options. Right now, I'm seeing families delaying the decision to move into a long-term care facility or to hire help to come into the home. And because symptoms are worsening, but there's no increased care, that puts a lot of added pressure on both parties. Uh, Along with that, there can be an increase in other obligations, so things that I need to worry about that are sort of pandemic related. It takes a lot more energy, time, and thought to go out to do simple chores just like grocery shopping, or arranging for a delivery than it used to before. It's a time of learning new skills, which can be a positive thing, and we'll talk about that a little bit later too, but also provides a little bit of stress in this situation. If you're not a person who's adept at technology, this is a time that has been potentially very trying for you as you learn new things like Zoom and FaceTime and all of these other things that people are asking you to do. Finally, there's the uncertain timeline. For many people, what I hear is, I could really get through this if I knew that there was an end date in mind. If I knew I had to stick this out for a year, I would be fine. But the fact that there is no specific deadline and that we don't know when these restrictions will be lifted has left some people with what I'm hearing the term is now is COVID fatigue. So this time has come with a lot of added stress, and I want to spend a little bit of time differentiating between stress and anxiety, because stress can be a positive thing as well. Um, It is the emotional and physical response to pressure. So stress is really something that is kind of temporary in nature. It can be a long-term thing that's temporary, but it essentially is this sort of pressure, either internal or external, um, that pushes us to rise to the occasion. So stress can be a good thing. If we're feeling worried about something, stress can be a motivator to make a change, to get things done, to work a little harder. But unmanaged stress, more than we can bear, can lead to some really poor physical and emotional health. And negative behavioral outcomes for us or the person living with dementia as well. Anxiety, in contrast, is a symptom of stress, but it is really the ongoing feeling of pressure. It can be a symptom of those concrete things that we talked about, those internal, external stressors, but it also may exist in the absence of stressors. As we think about stress, we want to make sure that we highlight that it is more than a feeling. Anxiety certainly can be a part of stress, as can depression and feelings of being overwhelmed or frustrated and all those other things, but they come along with other uh, factors as well. And all of those factors work together to increase that feeling of anxiety. So those physical effects that we have as a result of stress, those emotional reactions, those behavioral impacts work like cogs in a wheel to keep that anxiety machine running. Here are some of the effects of stress, both emotional, physical, and behavioral. And I'm not going to read through each one of these, but there are a few that I want to highlight. Again, anxiety is an emotional effect of stress, along with many, many other emotional expressions that we can have during those periods of added pressure. Behaviorally, we might try to react to those things by, um, changing the way that we respond in our lives. Many of those behavioral uh, outcomes or effects can be negative. So, drinking, smoking, changing our eating habits, having anger outbursts, pulling away from the people that are supportive of us. Although I should mention that there are positive behavioral effects of stress as well. So many people rise to the occasion by reaching out for support, either professional or personal, or they decide that they're going to increase their level of exercise, those kinds of things as well. So this is not a definitive list, but it is a list of common things when stress is not being managed well. Along with that, there are many physical effects of stress, and many times these go unnoticed, or we think that they're just a new physical condition that adds to our level of stress. But often these are things that can be managed as if we recognize them as part of this machine of unchecked stress. So even things like decreased immune efficiency or difficulty sleeping or chronic headaches can all be part of that stress response. One that I really want to talk about here is an increase in cortisol levels. Cortisol is a stress hormone in our brain, and as it builds up, our brain's ability to function decreases. So if you're familiar with Teepa Snow, she has a system that is called the GEMS. She uses this staging system as a way to explain brain change, both in dementia and in normal healthy adults. For most normal healthy adults, Teepa would label us a sapphire. And this type of gem is somebody with a healthy brain who's flexible, able to respond in the moment, able to take in new information, able to rise to the challenge of a stressful world. However, under pressure, Teepa would say that even healthy adults can become what's called a diamond. In a diamond state, adults become very concrete. They have difficulty taking in new information. They're inflexible and rigid. If you throw them a wrench, they're going to have a really hard time adapting to that situation. As our cortisol levels rise, that's what happens in our brains. We become more diamond-like. We have a difficult time making decisions, taking in new information, rising to the challenges that stress is bringing to us. Um, so it's important that we're learning healthy adaptations to these stress responses so we can decrease that cortisol level and become more like a sapphire. If you're interested in learning more about Tipa's gem system, you can go to her website. It's tipasnow.com, and there's a video called The Gems. And it's very interesting and helpful way to think about your mental state and the mental state of somebody that you may be supporting. All right, so let's talk about these a little bit more in depth. First, I want to focus a little on those physical symptoms because they are so easily missed. In this time of increased stress, it's really important that we are listening to our bodies and responding. Oops, sorry about that. All right, so in this way, we need to become our own caregiver. Um, Oftentimes, even the best caregivers have difficulty with this. We spend so much time and energy focusing on the person that we're supporting, providing them the best care, making sure that their rights and their needs and their wants are respected, that we forget we should be doing the same thing for ourselves. We forget to go to our own doctor's appointments. We forget to eat lunch. We forget to make time for our own social needs. So today is the day that I want you to challenge yourself to rise to the occasion of becoming your own caregiver. First and foremost, that means not neglecting your own medical care. So if there are conditions or concerns that you have, make sure that you're scheduling and going to those doctor's appointments. Make sure that you are taking your medication the way that it is supposed to be taken, that you are not doing things that could jeopardize your own physical well-being. Make sure that you're getting regular exercise. I know this sounds a little bit like beating a dead horse. This is something that most medical professionals will tell you, but this is one that does kind of double duty. So not only is it good for keeping those physical symptoms in check, but this is one that also can impact your emotional state and um, your sense of well-being as well, which we'll see in just a little while. Um, People often ask me what is the best exercise to do, and my answer to that is the one which you will do. So whatever kind of exercise you are willing to do, whether it's swimming or walking or dancing or hiking, whatever it is, get out and do it. If you're the kind of person that loves any kind of exercise or who doesn't know where to start, the general rule of thumb is that anything that's good for your heart is also good for your head. So anything that gets that blood pumping is going to benefit both your body and your brain. Next, take a look at your sleep. Most adults underestimate how much sleep they should be getting per night. And there is a misconception that as we get older, we need less sleep. And that actually is not true. Um, Many older adults get less sleep, but that's not because their body needs less. The average adult needs about 8 hours of sleep per day for their body and brain to fully recharge. Some of us need a little more, some of us need a little less, but that's a pretty good rule of thumb. The good news is that if you're not somebody who sleeps completely through the night, you can actually get that in a couple of chunks. So if you sleep maybe 6 hours at night and then are able to get a 2-hour nap during the day, that still counts. It's not quite as good as getting it all together, but it still is regenerative for your brain and body. Next, learn to breathe. Sometimes when I present this program in person, this is where people start to look at me funny, like, oh gosh, she's not going to tell me to go meditate, is she? Well, I think we all could benefit from a little bit of meditation, but that's really not what I'm asking here. Remember those cortisol levels that we talked about before? In order to get those back down to a normal level so that we can think and function more clearly, all we need is 3 long, deep breaths. This is the best way of coping for people who say, I don't have enough time to do self-care activities. Self-care can be just that 20 seconds it takes you to do 3 long, deep breaths. So when you do this, you want to breathe in deeply, filling your lungs in through your nose, and then blow out and deflate your lungs completely through your mouth. 3 times in a row resets that cortisol level in your brain and gets you to a point where you are at your optimal thinking level. So if you're stuck in a situation that you think, I don't know what to do next, take a little time out, step to the side, take 3 breaths, and give it another go. Another quick coping technique is one that I've been teaching for years called the 5-4-3-2-1 coping technique. And this is a practice in grounding. Grounding is just essentially connecting us to our surroundings in the moment so that we can break the cycle of worry that often comes with stressing over the future. So with the 5-4-3-2-1 technique, what you're asked to do is stop yourself. Take a breath and look and find 5 things around you which you can see, 4 things around you which you can touch, 3 things around you which you can hear, 2 things around you which you can smell, and 1 thing around you that you can taste. Pulling yourself back into the moment with this coping technique breaks the cycle of worry and shifts your mind to the present so that you're able to begin again when it comes to focusing on the task at hand. Next piece of advice is to laugh. That can seem a little bit crazy when we are in the middle of a very stressful pandemic and a very potentially stressful caregiving situation. But the good news is that our brain doesn't know the difference between real and fake laughter. Real laughter obviously is the best. We're going to get the biggest emotional and mental boost from real laughter. So find something funny to watch on television, tell silly jokes with someone in your house. Whatever it takes to get you really laughing is going to be ideal. If you're really not up to that, can't find the motivation, or don't seem to find things funny, use fake laughter. On the Dementia Friendly Bloomington webpage, we have a laughter yoga class that's recorded that you can do anytime in the virtual engagement section of dfbloomington.org. You can just practice on your own by looking in the mirror and giving big, fake, deep belly laughs. And your brain doesn't know the difference between what's real and what's fake. So it has a hard time holding both laughter and anxiety at the same time and can actually break the chain momentarily of those anxious, stressful feelings. This also raises the dopamine in our brain, and dopamine, of course, is our happy drug. Finally, if you're so inclined and need the support, find a local support group. At the Alzheimer's and Dementia Resource Service, we have a few different groups, both for people living with dementia as well as for care partners that are open to the public and currently operating in the virtual atmosphere. And you are welcome to reach out to us about that information if you are interested. If not, there are support groups of all types, formal and informal, across Bloomington. Now that we have our physical well-being under control, let's focus on our self-talks and expectations. Sometimes it is really us who is our own worst enemy. And if the record that we are always playing in our head is telling us that there's something to be worried about, that we aren't doing things right, that we should be doing something better in our care relationships, eventually we start to believe that information, and it can become overwhelming, and it can actually become a self-fulfilling prophecy. So our goal, and what I will challenge you with today, is to focus on realistic caregiving. No caregiver is perfect. I know we have all met somebody that we think, gosh, they really seem to have it all together and I wish I could be just like them. I guarantee you that that person is feeling that way about somebody else. So rather than focusing on getting it all right and being the perfect caregiver, our goal should be to strive for balance and health, both for us and the person that we're caregiving with. Sometimes we mess up. That's going to be okay. Um, Rather than worrying about that mess up, let's train ourselves to remember what it is that we're doing well. So when we're disappointed about the way that things have gone, or we can't get something done, or the person that we're caring for really is resistant to something that we would like them to do, the first question we should ask ourselves is, so what? So what? In the grand scheme of things, is this really something that I need to be spending my energy on? Or is it something I can let slide? Is it important to their health or well-being or safety to make sure that this happens? Or does it really just bother me? Asking this question, so what, can help us to reprioritize and to reframe, to think about what is really important in the moment and in the overall balance of our life and health. Um, it's kind of a pick your battle sort of question. Also, we need to stop comparing ourselves to others. I know I mentioned that a little bit earlier, but it bears repeating. The way that things go in someone else's house are not necessarily going to be the way that they go in our house. Uh, Looking at the lives of your friends on Facebook doesn't show you the whole picture. So we need to stop comparing ourselves to others, or we're never going to feel like we hit that mark. Going hand in hand with that, we need to be forgiving of ourselves and others. We need to know that we're human, we make mistakes, and while we are responsible for somebody else in our lives, we are not perfect and we are not omnipotent. So forgive yourself for being human, and you'll find that the stress lifts off your shoulders. Forgiving others is also important. A lot of times I'll see care partners who are frustrated because other family members won't pull their weight, so to speak, or doctors don't give them the information that they want. We can't force other people to be like we want them to be. There's an old saying that says, holding a grudge is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Being angry with other people in our lives for not reacting in the way that we want them to isn't hurting that person. It's only hurting us. So by forgiving that person and letting it go, we can focus on what's more important to us. Like praising ourselves. We're quick to beat up on ourselves when things go wrong, but when was the last time you told yourself, great job? Thank you for all that you do. Find time to stop and appreciate it when things go well. And don't just think about it, but tell someone else. Praising yourself to somebody else, particularly somebody that understands the situation well, will really drive home the fact that actually you're doing a better job than you thought. Also, enjoy the little things. During the pandemic, this has been something that has been particularly important in controlling stress and anxiety. When this pandemic first began, many of my colleagues and I all thought, okay, well, we'll stay at home for a couple of weeks and then we'll be back in the office ready to go. As things stretched on, we became more anxious about giving up the things that we loved, not being able to do our work the way that we thought we should be. And so it was important that we turn to the little things rather than focusing on my kids' sports seasons that were canceled, or not being able to see groups in person, or all of the things that I was missing out on. Instead, what I tried to do was focus on the gratitude for the smaller things, right? The warm home that I have to work from, the ability to actually have time to grow a garden, right? All those little things in your life that are going right. Sometimes these might be really little. Oh, this coffee tastes amazing this morning. But cultivating that mindset to notice and to give appreciation for even the smallest things that we are grateful for, you'll notice that you actually start to notice more of them as you practice this habit. And it's not because things are necessarily going better, but it's because we've tuned our minds in to see the good rather than the things that are going wrong. Next, know your limits and stick to them. Caregivers are often people that want to help out, and they want to help everyone. It can be really, really difficult to tell others no, especially when they need your help or it's something that you feel passionate and strong about. But you cannot do it all. Spend some time talking to yourself about what your limits are. They might be limits because you don't have the time for them, or you don't have the interest in them, or you don't have the ability that it takes to do them. Whatever the reason that you're setting a limit there, stick to it. Practice coming up with some ways of saying no that feel okay to you. Say something like, I really would love to do that. You know how much I care about this cause. But right now, while I'm taking care of mom, I just don't seem to have the time. I'll follow up with you if things change. Right? Most people understand limits and can respect that for others. Those who don't seem to have problems with limits themselves, and those are the kinds of people that we have to forgive and let go. Finally, and I know it sounds like I'm starting to harp on this, connect with others. Although this is difficult during a pandemic and it's something that has changed and that we can't do all the time in person, there are ways of safely connecting with those around us, and we'll spend a little bit of time talking about that today. Okay, now that we've made a plan for our physical and emotional well-being, I want to talk a little bit about practical problems. A lot of caregiving comes with a set of, quote, problems or issues or tasks that need to be managed. Sometimes there are things that we can't set limits with or that we can't just let go. And so I want to talk a little bit about how we take care of those practical things so that they don't become an overwhelming monster. First things first, I want you to sit down, paper and pencil, and identify all your sources of stress. They could be big, like mom's dementia leaves her not remembering me, or they could be small, like the library books are stacking up and I don't have time to take them to the library. Whatever they are, jot them all down. Don't spend a lot of time thinking about this, but just kind of do a brain dump. Let it all flow out. And then I want you to think about the serenity prayer. I know that not everyone listening to this may be religious, and that's okay. I just want you to get to the heart of this prayer, and that is determining really, really what we can and cannot control. What are the things that we cannot change? What are the things that we can? And come up with that list so that you can focus on what's most important. Once you have that list, where do we start? This chart is from a pamphlet called The Tyranny of the Urgent. It's maybe not my most favorite piece of literature, but this is a helpful way of thinking about things. A lot of times when we're feeling bogged down, what we will notice are that we are focusing on things that are not important and urgent. The author of The Tyranny of the Urgent groups tasks into 4 categories. So those are not important, not urgent. Those are the things that, if it happens, but it's really not a big deal, like cleaning out the junk drawer in the kitchen. The not important urgent, right? These are things that may not affect that big picture all that much, but are really pressing, might have a deadline. So a friend is asking you to do a favor for them that you said yes to, like take care of a cat. But again, to the overall picture, they're not maybe that big of a deal. This is where most people actually spend their time. And this is why people feel like they're spinning their wheels, like they are working and working and working and nothing is ever getting done. Where we ought to be focusing our time is on things that are important and urgent. To the big picture, are these things going to move the needle for me? Are they really going to matter? So things like taking mom to her cardiac appointment, right? That is something that really matters in the big picture and also is urgent, right? It's something that we need to take care of now for her own health and because there's an appointment set. So we've got to take care of that task. Unfortunately, while we're focusing ourselves on the urgent quadrant, something really important gets missed, and that is the important but not urgent. These are things that really are key to our well-being, but maybe don't feel like they've got as much pressure attached to them. Things like having lunch with our friends, or exercising, or spending time in the garden if that is healing to my soul. When we ignore these important, not urgent things, we feel out of balance. So with your list of things that you can control, think about where those things fall. Are they important? If not, maybe they aren't things that should be on your list at all, or at least not at the top of your list. Are they urgent? Those are the things that we should be addressing first. Important and urgent, then important, not urgent. Then we can get to those other things if we have the time. Just because you can do something does not mean that you should. This goes back to being willing and able to set and keep our limits. We can also do something that I call delegate and delete. Once you know what's important to your list, what are things that you can give to others to do? Sometimes that relative who's not engaging very much doesn't really know how to help. So reaching out to them with a direct request can often be a way to get them to join in and can feel really good for them as well. This is especially true if you have family members or friends who live far away and maybe can't be hands-on help. Think about things that you can offload to them, like making doctor's appointments online, researching a medication that you need to know more about, or looking into nursing facilities online and asking those places about their prices. The delete part of delegate and delete is crossing off those things that maybe are not important at all. Those things that maybe are making you feel pressured, but don't change that big picture for you. Now that you know what's really on your to-do list, start by addressing the least daunting item. It'll feel good to cross something off that list. So start with something little, even if it's not your most urgent, important item. Once you get going on that, you'll notice that other things seem to fall in line. And while you may be spinning your wheels and working really hard, you'll be moving forward rather than getting stuck in the mud. Finally, do something for you every day. Every day. You will not feel in balance until you are taking good care of yourself. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Make sure that you are staying in balance. This doesn't have to be something big. Maybe it's that you give yourself a chance to read for 15 minutes before everyone wakes up. Maybe it's that you go for a walk around the neighborhood. Maybe it's that you take those 3 deep breaths to get your cortisol down and then find somebody else in your house to share a laugh with you. Whatever it is, make sure that you are intentionally doing something for your betterment every day. I want to wrap up with the 4 A's that were developed by the Mayo Clinic. This is a way of pulling together all the things that we've talked about so far. So the 4 A's are avoid unnecessary stress. So remember, thinking about those things that are not important. Alter the situation. This is our delegate and delete. What doesn't need to be on our list? What can someone else do for us? Adapt to the situation, right? Accepting those things that, hey, you know what, we can't change. So I'm going to pick my battles and I'm not going to spin my wheels on this one. And adopt a healthy lifestyle. Make sure that we are taking good care of our own physical and emotional well-being. So I want to wrap up today with talking about how we can stay connected in this time. Isolation is dangerous for all of us. There are many, many studies that have happened over the years about people who have been physically or emotionally isolated, how it affects their health, their development, their mental well-being, and even whether or not they live or die. It is a dangerous and deadly thing. And as we are all being asked to stay further apart, I want to make sure that that doesn't mean that we are isolated. So while we are apart, there are a number of things that can keep us connected. The first thing I would say is to create anchors, because it can be so important for people living with dementia, and really for many of us, to have something um, to guide us as tent poles, to give us routine. It's really important that we're trying to recreate that in some way. So in some smaller ways, we can recreate that within our own homes, making sure we're still waking up at the same time, that we're having breakfast at the same time, that we have a little bit of a routine that way, but that we also have anchors outside of the house through the week, that we know church Zoom is going to happen on Sunday, or that we are going to get together with friends at a distance always on Tuesday nights. Whatever they are, create those things so that there's something to give us a little bit of a guidance through the week and something to look forward to. Connecting through the virtual space obviously has been something that's been very important as well. And I would say that if you can help those around you who are less technical to do that, or you can find somebody, if you're not the techie one yourself, to help you with that, this can be a really effective way at staying connected. There are lots of platforms to do this on. You can use FaceTime on your phone, you can use Zoom, you can use Skype, you can use Teams, you can use all sorts of things. But there's just something to be said about live interaction where you can see another person. And I would recommend scheduling these as much as you can, so that you're always meeting with, a family member or a friend at the same time. Otherwise, they tend to fall through the cracks. For people who might struggle a little bit with the technology, there are products out there that try to simplify this. One of the best ones that I have seen is called GrandPad. There's a picture of that on your screen, and it really simplifies everything. You can set it up so that it has pictures, so that it's easier to find the person you're looking for if you're starting to struggle a little bit with names or with language, things like that. So for instance, on the screen, you see the email screen. All that somebody would have to do to email that person is tap on the blue button below their picture, type or speak in what they want to say, and hit send. It also has the ability to do a FaceTime type feature, text messaging, and other things that you can set it up to do, and they are all very, very simplified like this. That big blue button on the left is if you want to email everyone in your book all at once. This is secure. This is something that can only contact the people that you have set it up for them to contact. So it's not like a real phone where they can dial a number unless it's been programmed in for them. So it's very easy to use, and it just comes on that charging pad where it can sit like that. If people really are struggling with that technical stuff though, and they just don't seem to be able to get it, or somebody doesn't seem to be able to be around to help them, there are other ways of connecting that are not virtual also. There is always the phone. There's letter writing, which people seem to respond to really well these days. I think there's something nice about getting a piece of real mail, or there's visits from outside a window. Whatever it is, schedule it in and make sure that you are talking with your loved ones. Another solution that I have seen is to volunteer from home. Lots of nonprofits right now really still need help, and because they can't have groups of volunteers in, they sometimes create opportunities for volunteering from home where you can take items to your own home that perhaps need to be packaged or counted or sorted, or whatever, and then returned later to that building so that you can safely do something that is helping your community. And this will really tie in with the last point that we have about staying connected today. Another solution could be to build a pod. Now, this is something I would say to do with caution, but a lot of the physicians and experts that I've been talking to have said that if you do this right, having a pod can be safe. So what I mean by pod is choosing, 1 to 2 other families or households that you agree to be with in sort of a mini bubble. Those people all have to agree that they will not be going out in other areas where they might raise their risk, and that you will be the only people that they will be with closely. So rather than just being, quote, quarantined with the people in your own home, you can be quarantined with some other friends or neighbors as well, providing you at least a small social circle that you can safely interact with when you need a little bit more connection. This can also be really helpful in a caregiving situation too. If something were to come up and you would need somebody to come over and help with your person, you'd know that that person in your pod is somebody that you feel safe and comfortable with health-wise. There's a lot of information on the internet about building a pod and how to do that safely if that's something that you are interested in. If you're not quite ready to do something like that, you can also interact from afar. So similar to the picture that's at the bottom of the screen there, now that the weather is getting nicer, keeping that distance between neighbors, but planning things like an outdoor dinner or a socially distanced block party can help you to feel connected and can allow you to see others in a way that is safe. This can be particularly helpful for people who do understand the need for social distancing, but might present some problems if you are caring for somebody who would try to cross the street to say hello to a neighbor or who doesn't understand the needs for that. So as you're thinking about which options would be best for you, think about the needs of the person that you might be supporting. Connect with nature. So getting out into open spaces in the woods, in the hills, at the lake, any places that provide that sense of nature can provide well-being for the soul and a feeling of connecting with the community and the environment. So it's a different kind of connection that we're talking about here, but really all of them are important. It's not only just staying connected to other people, but also staying connected to the spaces and places that are important for us. Which kind of ties in with my last point here, is that we each need to find a purpose. In order to keep our anxiety under control, we need to know why it is that we're waking up every day, and we need to engage in things that make us feel good about ourselves and the world around us. So whether it's volunteering, whether it's being a part of our family, whether it's connecting to nature, we need to do things that help us find who we are in them. Just another quick note too that I forgot to mention here. If you do regularly do virtual things with family or with groups, I have found that it can be very helpful to have something tangible to do together. It can make that time more meaningful, and it can be more engaging for people who might struggle with attention. So for instance, we have a group of people living with dementia who does activities through our program here, and we will often provide them either art materials or gardening materials or whatever it is we're doing that day. We'll drop them off on their doorsteps ahead of time so that when we meet over Zoom, we're all doing the same activity together. And that seems to provide more of a feeling of connectedness than we might have if we were just sitting and having a conversation. This can be done on a smaller level too. I have a client who sews with her granddaughters frequently, and so she will tell them ahead of time what materials they need, and they will practice together over Zoom. Staying connected and learning new skills, which is also important for our brains. There is also lots of professional support around, so please feel free to reach out to us for more ideas or if you need more support. The Alzheimer's and Dementia Resource Service covers 11 counties in South Central Indiana, and we are a free service to the community. So we have our main office in Bloomington, which covers 9 of those counties, and then we have the Rural Dementia Network, which covers 2 counties, Lawrence and Orange. And so you are welcome to call or email either of our offices if you could use some support. We also, as I mentioned, have several support groups. So we have a spouse support group, which will be Wednesdays from 3 to 4. We have the Monroe County Caregiver Support Group, which is open to any type of care partner. So children, grandchildren, siblings, spouses, whatever it may be. And that's the second and fourth Mondays. And then we have the Southern Indiana Caregiver Support Group that covers Lawrence, Orange County, and some of those southern counties down there, twice a month. Then we have our service and support group. This is a group for people living with mild to moderate dementia. We meet once a month for support and a kind of check-in of how we're doing. And then we meet once a month for a social activity, like I mentioned, with the gardening and the art and all that. I'm not going to put up the hours for that just because that is something that I like to meet people ahead of time before they get involved in. Any of the other groups you can just show up to. And if you want more information about any of these, you can visit our website, www.alzresourceindiana.org. I hope this has been very helpful for you. I will send out a copy of this PowerPoint to those of you who attended today, as well as a list of virtual resources and activities for outings and tours and things like that. So if you want to engage in those things at home, maybe visit a museum from your couch, you have some opportunity to do that. Please feel free to reach out with any other questions. Thank you and have a great day.